What is up, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Hit that like button for me, guys, as you come in the chat. Say what's up, say where you are watching from. Welcome to the daily live stream, y'all. It is Tuesday. I hope your week has been good thus far. It's early in the week. We had Tuesday, so I hope so far the week's been treating you good. If not, treat yourself well. Self-care is a real thing. All right, guys. So I got a couple clips for us to react to. Only 3 because I want to jump on again today before midnight. So with that being said, welcome to Cozy Corner TV, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Kieran Smith. Call me Q, and we are on the corner. What's up, everybody? We're on the corner. We are back. So about 3 clips I got today. Not too long. About 27 minutes of video time with me commentating in between, and then I'm going to try to jump back on here before midnight. Well, I'm not going to try. That's the goal tonight. So that goal is going to get met. So with that being said, let me tell you guys what we're about to digest. As a big advocate on the channel for mental health and wellness, I ask that as you guys, before you guys take this in, you make sure that you're grounded and regulated. What does that mean? Woosai. Like you don't feel like already killing someone. Why? Because news can be triggering, right? Well, music can be too, but news can be triggering. That's what we're about to watch. So make sure that you are. If you're not, come back and watch it later. If you are, welcome to the daily live stream. We got Trump at the Energy and Innovation Conference, but we're not covering that. At least not right now. Maybe I will later on tonight. But first up on the menu, we got Matt Morris TV. Shout out to Matt Morris. We react to Matt over here on the channel often. Please go check out his channel when you guys get a chance. Today he covered This Changes Everything. So this is in reference to Jeffrey Epstein's partner, who is also in prison. And now she has claims that she may be wrongfully in prison. So I'm not going to tell too much on that. We're going to let Matt give us the 411 on that. We're going to switch gears and jump over to Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to Bill. We react to Bill over here on the channel often. He covered, is Trump on the right track with Russia? Okay, this is in regards to something that President Trump has recently said, how he is very disappointed and not happy with Russia and their recent behavior. Who says one thing, sends bombs into Kyiv. President Trump's not very happy right now. Last time we checked on the live stream, President Trump said that there is going to be a, I think a 50-day pause to give them a chance to do something about this ceasefire, come to some type of deal, and if not, I believe 100% tariffs will be enforced. That's on top of the tariffs that are already in place. So we're going to see how that works out. Probably not the best. Putin did say something. He did say that he wanted to buy something, but we're not reacting to that on this live stream. So we'll probably get into that tomorrow if I don't do it on the next live stream later on tonight. And then we're gonna jump over to Breaking Point. Shout out to them. Megyn Kelly dismantles Ben Shapiro's Epstein denialism. So 2 different ends of the spectrum here. Ben Shapiro seems to have taken the stance that anyone who is watching the trial with the eagle eye should know that there were not any files to begin with. LM Edits, shout out to you. What's up? Thanks for stopping by on the live stream. Hit that like button for me. Ben Shapiro takes that stance. Someone like a Candace Owens and a Megyn Kelly are taking the stance that no, this is a total lie. This is bogus. The AG herself said that she had these files, this client list on her desk, and she was about to go through it. Where did it go? So this is still a big deal. So we'll take a look at Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro kind of duke that out. And then we'll end the live stream with a Christian clip from Cliff Buell. Shout out to Cliff. Why is this concept so hard for pro-choicers? So we'll take a look at that. All right. First up on the menu, we got Matt Morris TV. This changes everything. So this is in regards to Epstein's partner, who now believes that she may be wrongfully accused. So let's take a listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ongoing controversy regarding the Jeffrey Epstein case has just taken one of the most bizarre turns I've ever seen, and honestly, things are starting to get a little bit weird. You see, despite receiving 5 different federal convictions and a 20-year-long prison sentence for her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell has actually always maintained her innocence for years now, refusing to plead guilty to anything. Now, just to be very clear, Maxwell isn't innocent in any way that you or I would accept. What she's trying to do is make a very litigious argument. Take a look at this. Maxwell's primary claim is that because of Jeffrey Epstein's sweetheart deal in 2008, in which he pled guilty to various crimes in order to get a reduced prison sentence of just 18 months, one of the conditions of the deal was that all of Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators would be granted immunity. And so because Maxwell was a co-conspirator, she's trying to argue that right now she's actually been wrongfully imprisoned. And so I hate to say this because she's very clearly an evil, disgusting human being, but Maxwell's argument might actually have some sort of legal merit to it. Which is why her and her legal team have been trying to petition the U.S. Supreme Court to take a look at her case. And so folks, this is where things get a little bit weird. Maxwell has been petitioning the Supreme Court for almost 4 months now, trying to get them to take a look at her case.
What's up?
But
Shout out
just
to
yesterday
you.
afternoon, seemingly out of the blue, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi's leadership filed an official request to the Supreme Court urging them to completely ignore Maxwell's requests. But folks, I actually haven't even told you the strangest part about all of this. Yesterday morning, just hours before
let me go back to that, because listen to this part he says right here.
But just yesterday afternoon, Supreme Court for almost 4 months now, trying to get them to take a look at her case. But just yesterday afternoon, seemingly out of the blue, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi's leadership filed an official request to the Supreme Court urging them to completely ignore Maxwell's requests. But folks, I actually haven't even told you the strangest part about all of this. Yesterday morning, just hours before the DOJ gave their suggestion to the Supreme Court to ignore Maxwell's requests, the news broke that Maxwell, for the first time ever, is now willing to speak in front of Congress and publicly share all of the information that she has.
So this is where it's going to get crazy, because now they're saying that there is no list, or if there is a list, if there is, that it's not an incriminating list. But according to these headlines, Maxwell just came out the other day, and it says, is Ghislaine Maxwell ready to reveal the truth about Jeffrey Epstein's list? So I'm like, okay, so if she's ready to reveal the truth, if she's ready to reveal this truth, obviously she feels like this is going to help her in some way, shape, or form, right? Because she's had all this time to do it before. Maybe she thought that they were really going to release the list, so that's why she kept quiet. But now, for some reason, she's like, I'll talk about the list. So this is where it gets interesting, because they've already told the public that there is no list. There's nothing we have to worry about. So now, apparently, Maxwell has a list that people might be interested in.
Here, all of the information that she has. Now, of course, are we all to believe that Ghislaine Maxwell, the 5-time convicted human sex trafficker and Epstein accomplice, is going to give a trustworthy congressional testimony? Probably not, but still, the timing of all of this is just absolutely strange. Now, don't misunderstand anything I'm saying here and think that I'm sticking up for Maxwell or anything like that, but it does seem to me like there's some sort of concerted effort here to stop Maxwell from speaking publicly and giving her side of the story, however untrustworthy it may be.
Others feel for overnight boarding. Your pet will stay overnight in your sitter's home and not only be treated like part of the family.
And now, folks, we have a lot more to talk about here. Trust me, we're just getting going. But before we move on, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. Longtime friend of Donald Trump and political strategist Roger Stone says that the reason why Ghislaine Maxwell's offer to speak in front of Congress and give her side of the story is getting roadblocked is because right this very moment, the Clintons are absolutely panicking and doing every single thing they can to keep her from talking.
Oh boy.
And so here's a very important question. Do the Clintons still have enough political capital inside of Washington, D.C. to actually shut down Maxwell? Absolutely. And also, do the Clintons have a reason to want to shut down Maxwell? Once again, absolutely. We all know just how disgusting of a person Bill Clinton really is. And so, folks, maybe that's one angle to all of this that actually makes a little bit of sense. But you know what? What do you say we move on to the current state of the Epstein investigation? Very clearly, large swaths of the MAGA base have been very upset with how all of this Epstein stuff has been handled. But ladies and gentlemen, I actually have some good news for all of you today. You see, just yesterday afternoon, President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, actually helped shed some extra light into this entire situation. Take a look.
What would be your advice? Given this back and forth, we're just coming off of Turning Point here in Tampa. This was the topic of conversation. What would be your advice in order to take the temperature down on this issue from within the administration?
Well, I do think that there needs to be more transparency on this, and I think that will happen. I mean, look, I don't know what truly exists there, but I know that this is something that's important to the president as well. He does want transparency on all these fronts, everything we're talking about, because it's frustrated him as well. He sat for 4 years like the rest of us did and saw lie after lie and saw our country just being sent down the wrong path. And it was really frightening, very upsetting to a lot of people to see. And I would actually say over the past 10 years, we've all kind of endured this. Prior to that, it was probably happening, Benny, but we just weren't as aware of it. It wasn't until Donald Trump came down that golden escalator that he just kind of blew the doors with everything, and people started to wake up and realize, wait a minute, things are not as they have always been presented to us. And I do believe that you will see that. Now, as it relates to the president, I know that this is probably not his number one thing he's focused on. He's focused on a lot of other important things. We've got this big announcement with Russia going on. I think as we're speaking right now at the White House, we have, a Middle East, we're trying to make peace over there. We're trying to make sure that Iran's nuclear arsenal is obviously completely decimated. We want to make sure everything is on.
So Donald Trump is basically saying he has other things to worry about. This is not at the top of his list.
The right track for this country. Fortunately, you see no border crossings in the last month. 0, by the way. I think that's incredible. No one's talking about that enough. 0 illegal border crossings in the month of June. Amazing how that's all gone. So I don't know that this was top of mind for him, but he hears all the noise and he hears all the consternation out there. And I think he's going to want to set things right as well. So I believe that there will probably be more coming on this. And I believe anything that they are able to release that doesn't, damage any witnesses or anyone underage or anything like that, I believe they'll probably try to get out sooner rather than later because they hear it and they understand it.
And so, folks, Laura Trump just said something absolutely astounding that you might have missed if you weren't paying close attention. As Laura Trump just said about President Trump and all of this Epstein drama, quote, he hears all of the noise and he hears all of the consternation out there, and I think he's going to want to set things right.
Yeah.
I believe that there will probably be more coming on this. And so what does that mean? That means that President Trump is very clearly aware that huge portions of the MAGA base are upset with how all of this has been handled, and that he plans on actually doing something about it. As you all know, President Trump actually cares what his supporters say. He actually listens to us and he takes in all of our feedback. And honestly, this is one of the best things about President Trump. This is one of the huge things that sets him apart from most of the other politicians in Washington, D.C. I have to be honest here, over the last couple of days, it has been absolutely astounding to me to see some people here in the MAGA community say things like, shut up, get back in line, trust the plan, stop asking questions, do as you're told. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not forget that getting out of line and bucking the status quo and letting our American voices be heard and electing a populist outsider like President Trump is how the entire MAGA movement got its start just 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Let's be brutally honest here for a moment. One huge thing that sets us apart from the progressive left is that over here on the America First side of the aisle, we are all supposed to be critical thinkers. We don't...
See, I like what Matt's doing here because it's very true. And I like the fact that he's coming at the MAGA group for it, because so many people think that just because you might be a MAGA supporter or a Trump supporter, that you're going to support every single thing you see on that side. And it's just simply not true. He's literally saying here, let's not forget, for us to be critical thinkers, for us to think about what's actually going on, and if we feel the need to criticize it, that's actually okay. As American citizens, we have the right to criticize it. He's like, don't get so caught up in the whole MAGA thing and just tell people to shut up and do as they're told and not to ask any questions. That's not even the foundation of us as American citizens. So I can appreciate the fact that Matt is calling this out, because so many think that if you are a Trump supporter, you agree with every single thing that he does, and it's just simply not the truth.
Shy away from using our First Amendment rights to let our elected leaders know what we think, and we're also capable of having an open and honest dialogue. In fact, it is this very process that has ultimately made this America First, Make America Great Again movement so incredibly powerful and successful. Why? Because the people's voices actually matter.
Shout out to
But
Matt.
so, folks, here's the point of all of this. As it would seem, according to Laura Trump at least, President Trump is actually cooking something up right this very moment to help bring this entire Epstein situation to a satisfying conclusion. And you know what? Good. If you ask me, it is about damn time that all of these disgusting Washington, D.C. swamp beasts get brought to justice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do...
Shout out to Matt Morris for doing that. But again, I can appreciate that. You know, everyone, just because you are a MAGA supporter or even a Trump supporter, or if you're on the other side and you support Trump, it does not mean that you're going to do every single thing. Not just him, but his cabinet does. There's plenty of people who haven't agreed with Marco Rubio's approach on things. Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance. The list goes on and on. There's plenty of people that haven't agreed with the entire cabinet. So what I can appreciate Matt doing is he's saying, listen, like we're still allowed to be critical thinkers. As American citizens, we have the right to do that, and we should do that. All right, guys, we're gonna switch gears now and jump over to Bill O'Reilly. Mr. Bill O'Reilly covered, is Trump on the right track with Russia? Hence the title of my thumbnail. This is a big deal here because President Trump was very expressive over the last 24 hours about how he has been disappointed in Russia's actions. That he thought by now there would be some sort of deal made, but Putin seems to be going back on his word constantly. And we know that he's doing this. We even saw people from the Democratic side pointing this out, right? We saw Jasmine Crockett say, when is President Trump going to do something about Putin reneging on every single thing that he says? So we know that Putin's been doing this, but I think now it's at this point where President Trump's like, okay, you know, I wanted this solved by now, and he's playing games. He says one thing, he sends 60 bombs into Kyiv, and he kills people, or he sends bombs into Kyiv, and he kills 60 people. Either way, he's like, he's killing people, he's not working out a deal, he's not being a team player here, so now we have to take a different approach. So I think this is what leads to President Trump's remarks, so let's see what Bill O'Reilly covered.
So I asked my staff to find a really good guest on this that's not going to give you the predictable stuff, all right? Because I hate that, and I believe you're bored by it. So we came up with a guy named Mikhail Troitsky. He teaches at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University outside of Boston, which is a very, very good school. Now, Dr. Troitsky got his PhD in Russia. He's a Russian national in this country legally, of course. And he taught at the Russian Academy of Science, among other schools, in Moscow. First of all, Doctor, I appreciate your time. Am I making any mistakes with Putin and my analysis today?
Well, actually, I think, Bill, you are quite accurate. And I was even surprised to hear this great analysis regarding banking sanctions. That's exactly what would matter, and I think that's exactly what the Russian government is mostly concerned with. Not so much the secondary sanctions, as they are called, secondary tariffs on whatever India or China sends to the United States. That is going to be difficult to impose, but targeting Russia's remaining participation in the global financial system is, of course, going to be much more conducive to...
Yeah, and I hope Trump does it. He has not done it so far. As I said, I would have done it much earlier, and it's not Monday morning quarterback. We don't fool around here, Doctor. I mean, we know what's going on all over the place. I don't know whether you know, but I spent some time in Beijing in May. I mean, I know what's going on. And the oligarchs who prop Putin up, and that includes the generals of the military, as you know, okay, they're dependent on foreign money. They have all their money in foreign banks. That money's not in Moscow. You slap sanctions and freezes on all of the oligarchs' money, all of the generals' money, and Putin is done. Yep. Am I wrong?
Well, I think, generals might not have plenty of money stashed abroad, but you are right that this feeling of situation still being reversible for the oligarch and a large segment, millions of people in Russia who have assets both inside their country and in the West, so they feel it's irreversible, and they see the deal that the Trump administration puts on the table. And if, the situation kind of shifts towards irreversible with these new secondary sanctions and...
I don't know if it's irreversible, because Putin at some point is gonna make a calculation, just like the mullahs made in Iran, that, look, I better stop, or I better do something. But let me ask you this question. There's no really reliable reporting coming out of Russia, because they don't allow free press there, as you know. And if you go against Putin, you might wind up dead.
Absolutely.
Okay, literally dead.
So no
As
free
we saw
press in
last week
Russia,
with another,
because you might die.
45 former members of Putin's government are dead by suicide. They've fallen out windows. You know what the game is. But the Russian people themselves, all right, we get reports that, they still back Putin. Can that be possible?
Oh yeah, I believe so.
Well, the Russian people have largely been brainwashed, and this heavy-handed propaganda has been going on for more than a decade now, and it became especially violent in the run-up to the war. So, and then you are right that there's no accurate sociological data you can get out of Russia these days. But as we have seen over the past 3.5 years of the war, counting on the Russian society to stand up against the war, maybe not even against Putin, but just to become mildly critical about the war and do it openly, that hasn't materialized. So,
yeah, but I wonder why. I mean, I remember the Vietnam War days. I was around, and you had all of these Americans, 55,000 of them coming down dead, all right, and a lot of them coming home wounded. And the American public saw that in their towns, and they go, "Well, what are we doing over there?"
They were furious.
All right, Russian people at the city, you're losing sons and your friends and husbands and brothers, and do they don't care about that?
well, the short answer would be that the Russians are being paid to remain quiescent, and they are being promised a way of life that would largely leave them immune to the war, a major war that is...
Give me an example of what they're being promised, because Russians don't live very well. I mean, come on, and they're not America over there. They don't have any money, and then they're not living large. What are they being promised?
No, but over the Putin years, the standards of living in Russia, and in particular in large cities like Moscow, have risen dramatically. So,
and that's because of oil? Is that the oil sale?
Yeah, well, largely oil money, but making economy more efficient, borrowing some Western technology, getting some investment from the West, including the United States, the stock market, and there's ways to raise money for Russian corporations, or at least they're used to be such ways, and they are no longer in existence after 2022. So,
all right, that makes sense. Final question. Do you think President Trump is doing anything wrong here? I mean, obviously he made a mistake because he did believe he could reason with Putin, and that has not come out to be true. Is the president making any other mistakes in this conflict?
Well, I think from the perspective of ending the war, he's making a very reasonable evolution. And what I also liked about him is that he seems not to be deterred or impressed by any, nuclear brinkmanship and nuclear blackmail by some Russian figures. So he immediately calls them out on that brinkmanship, and that was something that I think the previous administration was cautious not to, push the envelope too far because of that.
Yeah.
So the Kremlin knows there's limits as to how heavily that they can try to blackmail Trump. Otherwise, he's making progress in his thinking about Russia, and that he invokes his conversations with Melania, who apparently tells him, look, what Putin is doing after you just talked with him, that makes the whole thing very personal to him. So I would expect more of that evolution in the coming week.
Yeah, and I mean, Mr. Trump could lean on China a little bit, and I hope that happens. Hey, Professor, we really appreciate it. Thanks very much for helping us out tonight. Thank you.
Shout out to Bill O'Reilly. He makes a great point right here when he says this. Let me go back really quick.
And nuclear blackmail by some Russian figures. So he immediately calls them out on that brinkmanship. And that was something that I think the previous administration was cautious not to, push the envelope too far.
So he's talking about President Trump here and how his hands-on with Russia is, and he's saying that the previous administration, they weren't that bold with them at all. Like, if Russia is wanting to push out some type of information or push forward some type of agenda, they were careful about pushing the envelope, whereas President Trump, he calls them out on it, he says something about it, and they've been careful not to do things like that with him. And this is where previously on live streams I said this is why it's so important for us to have such a strong world leader, because even if people don't like what he's doing, the world is still paying attention to his actions. They still pay attention to how he handles things, whether he's under pressure or he's not. So when you have a large country like Russia, and they are large, we fit inside of Russia, say something like, hey, we have this type of intel, or we're going to do this, or we're going to push this type of rhetoric and or agenda, and Trump's like, do it. Or he's like, I'm going to call you out on it in a press conference, and then they kind of retract. So I think that that's a big deal that he's pointing that out here. And Bill O'Reilly brings up some good points about saying, if he hits the generals, then Putin's basically done. But he also brings up a great point by saying, like, listen, Russia's done some things over time that you might think they don't have any money there, but Putin's made some moves and got some investments, including investments from the United States, that the country is doing substantially better than what it was doing in the past. So they're both making really good points here. As far as him being on track with Russia, he seems to think that Trump is, this gentleman seems to think that Trump is on a very good track with Russia, especially when it comes to not allowing them to manipulate him or coerce him due to some type of intel or agenda that they want to push. So I can appreciate us having a strong world leader in that sense. All right, guys, so we're going to switch gears now. We're going to jump over to breaking point. Shout out to them. Megyn Kelly dismantles Ben Shapiro's Epstein's denialism. So we're going to take a look at this. It seems like Megyn Kelly has jumped on the same side as maybe someone who views this whole thing as a Candace Owens, who thinks that, hey, we were told one thing, the AG seemed super sure, so sure that she told us that it was on her desk, and it was a mandate from the president for her to go through the files and or client list, and that the American people would be made aware of this. So here's the thing, about 5 months ago, Pam Bondi said that that's all over the news. It's like wildfire. And this is where I think this has been the most detrimental thing for the cabinet, trying to bounce back from what she said, right? So I'm not necessarily blaming, calling for her to be fired. I think a lot of people are being a bit overzealous when it comes to some of this. But just simply because it's not like, there was something going on like, Epstein was a terrorist or something like that. People just want to know what freaky stuff he was doing, especially if it was with minors or children, which that's understandable. But it's not something that, if this is not released, like America's in danger or something. At this point, the people just want to know. So I think that it's a good indicator here that we have someone like a Megyn Kelly and a Candace Owens on one side saying, hey, this is what the AG herself said out of her mouth. And then you have someone like Ben Shapiro who says, hey, listen, anyone who's watching that trial with the eagle eye knows that there wasn't a client list. I think that it's interesting that he took that stance, right? Did he always feel like that? I'm not saying he didn't, but I would just be curious to know, did he always feel like that? Did something click as the trial ended and maybe some time passed to where he was like, yeah, I don't think this is true? Or what exactly happened there? To say there's no client list at all, I don't know if I can take that stance. To say that there might be someone on a list that can possibly be hurt by this list who's a part of the current administration in the White House, I think that that's a higher possibility. I'm not going to say who it is. I don't know who it is, but it could just be anyone in the cabinet that they might be trying to protect, right? Some people are saying they're trying to protect Trump. That's why they're saying there's nothing in there. I don't think that they're trying to protect President Trump. I think that if there was enough garbage within this client list or whatever to get President Trump impeached and or out of there, or even look worse in the public eye than what people perceive that he already does, I think that would have already been leaked. So I don't think it's President Trump that they're trying to protect, but it could be someone within the cabinet. And maybe that's why it seems to be under wraps. A lot of people feel like they're trying to keep things under wraps and they're trying to like hide this or kind of like take light off of it and say, hey, now this client list isn't so important, even though this was one of the things that unfortunately President Trump did run on, the release of the Epstein files along with MLK and JFK. So let's take a listen to the breaking points, kind of break down Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro's talking points.
Was raw.
I'm gonna go back. Let's go back here.
Let's go ahead and get to this Megyn Kelly, Ben Shapiro debate, which I watched all of and I thought was pretty interesting. Megyn didn't take like a hard position of like, I definitely think that he was killed, or I definitely think that there are other powerful people who are implicated or whatever. She was more in the like, I really don't think we know exactly what went on here. And Shapiro was in the camp of like, nope, nothing to see here. Let's move on. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this first piece, which to me was just extraordinary because Ben says this thing of basically like, yeah, I was open to it, but once we got that memo, then I was like, oh, I guess there's nothing to see here. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
The government admits this. The FBI established that Epstein used paid employees to repeatedly find and bring minor girls to him. Epstein worked in concert with others to obtain minor girls, not only for his own sexual gratification, but also for the sexual gratification of others. So I don't know exactly what that means, Ben, but I know that's our government admitting in court that Jeffrey Epstein worked in concert with others to obtain minor girls, not only for himself, but also for the sexual gratification of others.
Yeah, Jay Herbert, that's probably a good idea. You probably shouldn't tell your boss that.
So you think?
Who are the others? Who specifically?
Well, I mean,
that hasn't been answered. I've heard names bandied about.
One obvious answer is Ghislaine Maxwell, right, who's in prison right now for having engaged in sexual abuse of children, right? And
Right.
one of the other people that you just mentioned is one of the others, right? Nadia, whatever her name is. So,
Right.
that is sort of the big open question that
So Megyn Kelly reads off that piece of information, and then she says others. Who are the others? And Ben, I'm going to go back, and Ben Shapiro says, well, one of them we know is Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in prison right now, and another woman he mentions, Nadia, and he doesn't say her last name. I thought this was hilarious because literally I said to myself, okay, Ben, let me get this straight. And it's like we react to Ben Shapiro here on the channel often. Like, I like Ben Shapiro, but I just thought to myself, let me get this straight, Ben. So you think it was just Jeffrey Epstein and two women that did this? Like, that's what you think? Like, there was no one else involved? It was just him and two women, and I just find that hilarious.
So for the sexual gratification of others. Who are the others? Who specifically?
Well, I mean,
that hasn't been answered. I've heard names
Well, I
bandied
mean,
about.
one obvious answer is Ghislaine Maxwell, right, who's in prison right now for having engaged in sexual abuse of children, right? And
Right.
one of the other people that you just mentioned is one of the others, right? Nadia, whatever her name is. So,
Right.
that is sort of the big open question that everyone was asking was, okay, who's that, like Stephen Hawking? Right, because he was one of the names who was mentioned, or Alan Dershowitz was one of the names who was
Lex
mentioned.
Wexner.
Right, with Barack, or Lex Wexner, right? Like, all these were and again, here's my thing. I was open to every single one of these theories until the DOJ and FBI put out a memo saying we have looked at all the evidence and here's what we have come to. Right?
You were persuaded by that memo without more? I mean, like, I wasn't persuaded. I also trust Dan.
I'm not persuaded by a memo. What I'm persuaded by is the fact that I have not seen evidence that they have seen, and so I'm not prepared to call Dan Bongino, Cash Patel, President Trump, J.D. Vance, and
It's
Ted
not the
Bundy.
same though. They're two-page memos. There's no credible evidence. No credible evidence. Well, somebody's made a judgment call there, and you can drive a truck through that exception.
What'd you think of that, Em?
Well, it's exactly what we were just talking about, that if the Trump administration, let's say even the two of us and people who have covered the story seriously and skeptically for years, if the Trump administration came out and produced evidence beyond trust us and a not raw piece of video that they told us was raw and said, listen, we really did look into it and we're going to show our work here and give you reason to believe us, other than, again, literally just trust us, that's all we've gotten so far. And so to say, I take their word for it, the conspiracy theory that is years and years in the making, where you have all of this public reporting. As I was listening to it, I was just like frustrated that from like a rational perspective, there's so much evidence in the category that there's a lot more to see than what the Trump administration is telling us, which is why even non-conspiratorial people are on the quote-unquote conspiracy bandwagon in this case, because there's mountains of public evidence reporting that there's much, this goes much deeper. And so from a rational perspective, it doesn't make sense to dismiss the case because you trust the word of people in power. It's weird, and I think it sounds like someone trying to get to the conclusion that nothing happened.
Yeah. And I mean, very interesting that the same people who are the most vociferously pro-Israel and bang the drums the most for war with Iran and all of these sorts of things also tend to be the ones in the hardcore there's nothing to see with regard to Epstein camp. Also notable. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this next part because this is potentially newsworthy. Megyn claims she actually has sources in the administration who say, no, this is a lie. This isn't what happened whatsoever. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
I have the names of the people who are making the claim that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself and that the most gross, and sort of extreme of the conspiracy theories, just don't even call them conspiracy theories, the most sort of, extreme version of the theory is not true. I have names of the people who are claiming that. Okay, they are all in the administration. And this is my point. If other people want to make those claims that are counter to that, then they should provide evidence or at least put their names on it so we can question them about that as well. Because otherwise we're just in the realm of pure speculation. And frankly, I just don't find that useful. I would love more useful information. This is why I'm angry at Pam Bondi. I think there should be all the useful information possible. But the same thing holds true for people who are making claims on the other side. Otherwise, I can claim that he was working for a cadre of space aliens who were blackmailing high-profile Americans in order to protect from a future invasion. And there's just about as much evidence for that as many of the claims that are being made on the other side.
All right, well, let's talk about that.
That is made requires evidence. Any claim that's being made requires actual evidence. And at the very least, in the absence of evidence, be credible names of the people that I can either trust or not trust.
And I mean, to be fair to Ben Shapiro here, he's not completely wrong. He says it requires actual evidence, and he's been going off the fact that because no one's provided actual evidence, and like the DOJ has come out and said this, and because he said that he wasn't convinced by a memo, so he's like, because the DOJ has come out and dropped that memo, and no one has provided any actual evidence, that's the reason why I'm convinced. So he's just not, at this point, I just get the feeling that it's given, he's not that interested in digging. Like, he just kind of has a trust for the administration the way he's like, okay, yeah, just like what the news anchor said, there's nothing to see here. So, just because they're, in his mind, okay, just because there's smoke doesn't mean there's fire, right? And in Megyn Kelly's mind, she's like, I don't know, there's smoke, there could be a fire somewhere because this isn't really sitting right. So, I can see where both of them are coming from.
Speculation, and frankly, I just don't find that useful. I would love more useful information. This is why I'm angry at Pam Bondi. I think there should be all the useful information possible, but the same thing holds true for people who are making claims on the other side. Otherwise, I can claim that he was working for a cadre of space aliens who were blackmailing high-profile Americans in order to protect from a future invasion, and there's just about as much evidence for that as many of the claims that are being made on the other side.
All right, well, let's talk about that.
That is made requires evidence. Any claim that's being made requires actual evidence. And at the very least, in the absence of evidence, be credible names of the people that I can either trust or not trust, ranging from, again, the President of the United States and the Vice President to the head of the FBI, the AG, and the Deputy Head of the FBI.
Well, I think it's very hard to say those people need to come out and put their names on these claims when they're working for an administration, this one and the one before, that didn't want that to come out. You're asking somebody to countermand the people they work for.
How am I supposed to falsify their claims? Now we're working in the realm of the
You're not, but look, Ben, you can't come to me and say, everybody I know says he killed himself. And then I respond saying, I actually have my own sources who say he didn't. And then you say, well, your sources are not valid because they won't put their names on it. Okay, who are your sources? Let's go down the list and then we'll talk about why they might be saying that.
My sources are the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, Dan Bongino, the Deputy Head of the FBI, and Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. And those aren't just my sources, they're everybody's sources because they publicly came out and said this.
Okay, Trump hasn't specifically weighed in on that specific aspect of it. We've all seen the limited things that Trump has said and tweeted on this. And J.D. Vance was calling for transparency and suggesting otherwise prior to taking office. He hasn't commented on this so far, so he's not one of your sources. You've got Kash, you've got Dan, and you've got Pam, and we've already discussed that memo in full detail. I'm talking about people behind the scenes who, prior to Trump taking office, I'm not going to get too specific, but trust me, I have high-level sources who have said they don't believe any of that. any of that.
Okay.
So, and I'm not gonna out them for purposes of convincing you, but you're telling me name them. No, I'm not going to. I don't have authorization.
I'm not
And
saying
then
no.
you say, well, I
Megan,
dismiss all
I'm
of
not
it because
saying-
you won't name
Hold
them.
Hold on, Megan, I'm not saying you should name them. I'm saying they should name themselves, because otherwise they are being complicit in one of the greatest cover-ups in the history
That's
of the
easy for
American
you to
public.
say then. That's very easy for
Why
you to
is
say.
it
Okay,
easy
so
for me to say? Why?
because you'll have your job and you'll have your millions, no matter
Are
what
you
they do.
kidding? Megan, give me a break.
So Emily, he's saying there, oh, well, if people think differently, then they should come forward, as if that's a casual and easy thing to do and, wouldn't have any potential personal consequences for them whatsoever.
We all agree with that, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes, of course, come forward. But again, it's not the rationalist perspective to say, because people won't put their name on it, it sort of undermines their credibility. It's like, if you go deep into this story, I mean, people have died, by the way. Like, people who may have had things to say have died under suspicious circumstances beyond just Jeffrey Epstein. There are a lot of, and I don't know that those add up to a conspiracy theory, but they're worth thinking about. And it's obviously true that when the stakes of something are so high, when you have the former labor secretary saying, and then not denying, they also talked about this, not denying really that he said Epstein belonged to intelligence. He was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence and to give that plea deal that Epstein got back in 2007. We have that over and over again over the series of years. Then, there's nothing, again, rational about saying, okay, because these people won't come forward, then we have to just go on the evidence that people in the government are telling us to trust. That I find the whole thing strange, and to me it does seem like someone trying to get from point A to point B. Like they want to justify it.
Suspect a little bit.
Maybe for Ben it's partially because he's deeply frustrated with the weird little alt-right mouth breathers who are using this for purposes of rank anti-Semitism, maybe, and that's an explanation as to why someone would stretch from point A to point B by just deferring to the president, who himself is implicated in all of this. I mean, Pam Bondi, who was state AG of Florida when charges, further investigations and charges could have potentially happened, as Julia K. Brown has pointed out. It is not in any way a persuasive defense.
Yeah, well, and just your point about the many questions and some other people who also died under questionable circumstances, Jean-Luc Brunel,
Yes.
was a pedophile and criminal and was a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein, who allegedly sent Epstein multiple underage girls, I think 12-year-old girls, for his birthday to sexually abuse, allegedly.
I've got something special for you guys today. Gamma and Stylecraft have brought something now.
He also killed himself in prison, and interesting, the cameras were off there too, and it was not also recorded. So, you've got that, you've got all of the questionable circumstances surrounding Epstein's death. Oh, those cameras happen to be off. Oh, the prison guards happen to be asleep. Oh, the official autopsy says, it was a hanging and it was a suicide. But when his brother had this further investigated, they said, I've never seen a suicide that would be consistent with the particular fractions of these bones in the neck. So, yeah, to just pretend like none of that is real, like it's all just a conspiracy theory, it's grotesque. And, the last thing I'll say here, Sagar tweeted this out yesterday, and I think this also bears mentioning. Here are the list, he says, of Israeli prime ministers linked to Epstein. Number 1, Shimon Peres introduced Ehud Barak to Epstein. Number 2, Ehud Olmert, named as an Epstein associate by USVI. Number 3, Ehud Barak, connections too vast to paraphrase. He's the one who really had the deepest Epstein connections from Israel. And Netanyahu met with JP Morgan after apparent Epstein intro. So there's just, we're just supposed to dismiss all of that. That's just a conspiracy, that there could be any there that's worthy of further investigation. And the most suspicious thing from Pam Bondi, I thought, is when she got asked about the potential intel connections, she played dumb, like, I haven't really looked into that. As if she had no idea that anyone had speculated that or there were any potential ties there whatsoever. I didn't really think about that. Didn't really look into that. Okay, girl.
Didn't she say, she was like, I'll have to get back to you.
I'll have to get back to you. Why don't you? Please get back to us, Pam Bondi. Get back to us on that.
We're still waiting on that.
Incredible. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Congressman Ro Khanna, who introduced this amendment to try to force transparency. Unfortunately, was voted down yesterday, but want to get all the details on that.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like.
Okay, shout out to Breaking Points for covering that. I thought it was very interesting because Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro, like I said, they both made some really great points. Yeah, I understand why they say that, why they cover it the way that they did, because Ben Shapiro kind of is, and he said it himself. He's like, you know, the memo from the DOJ, because there's no proof, I don't feel the need to look that deeper into it. And that's just kind of where he's at with it. You know, that's his stance on it. He has the right to take that stance. Like, hey, maybe to some people it looks like he's trusting the government a little bit too much, but he has the right to take that stance. And it looks like that's where he's at when he says, I'm just not ready to call Dan Bongino, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, President Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, Pam Baum. He's like, I'm just not ready to call all of them liars. So that's just his stance on that. Megyn Kelly's like, listen, I don't know if I'm necessarily willing to call them all liars, but something isn't adding up here. So I can see both of their points there. So we'll just continue to follow the whole Epstein thing because it seems to be a big deal right now. All right, guys. So switching to our last clip of the live stream, we have Cliff Buell. Shout out to Cliff Buell, YouTube content creator that focuses on Christian content. Because of Cliff, every night we can end the live stream here with a clip that points us to Jesus or talks about God in some way. So shout out to you, Cliff. And tonight's title is "She Missed the Whole Point." Why is this concept so hard for pro-choicers? All right, let's take a listen.
The logic of some of these pro-choicers is wild. Watch this.
If I just happen to be pregnant.
Oh, well, you don't happen to get pregnant. It's not like getting COVID.
I know how
okay?
it works. I know how it works.
You don't get the flu.
I know.
How about this?
Say
You
I got
take
pregnant.
responsibility for your orgasms and
What?
stop
That doesn't
eliminating
work.
people smaller than you.
So you're saying I should carry a baby and ruin my collegiate life?
How about this? Instead of saying ruin, first of all, babies are a blessing. Stop talking at them as if they're some sort of annoyance.
I will have to drop out of college.
Number two, if you play certain games, you win certain prizes. If you're going to go have sex...
So you're saying I should drop out of college to support my child and support my life?
I'm saying if you're going to engage in coitus, in the practice of having children, you might end up with a baby. So know that. Guess what? You don't need to have sex before you get married. It's not like showering. It's not like eating.
Are you married?
Yes, with 2 beautiful children.
Wow, good for you.
I can tell you're not married.
Yeah.
She said, wow, good
Thank you for your time.
The logic of some of these pro-choicers is wild. Watch this.
If I just happen to be pregnant.
Oh, well, you don't happen to get pregnant. It's not like getting COVID.
I know how
okay?
it works. I know how it works.
You don't get the flu.
I know.
How about this?
Say
You
I got
take
pregnant.
responsibility for your orgasms and
What?
stop
That doesn't
eliminating
work.
people smaller than you.
So you're saying I should carry a baby and ruin my collegiate life?
How about this? Instead of saying ruin, first of all, babies are a blessing. Stop talking at them as if they're some sort of annoyance.
I will have to drop out of college.
Number two, if you play certain games, you win certain prizes. If you're going to go have sex...
So you're saying
you
I
might...
should drop out of college to support my child and support my life?
I'm saying if you're going to engage in coitus, in the practice of having children, you might end up with a baby. So know that. Guess what? You don't need to have sex before you get married. It's not like showering. It's not like eating.
Are you married?
Yes, with 2 beautiful children.
Wow, good for you.
I can tell you're not married.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Dude, I'm dead. Like that interaction's hilarious. Charlie's like, I can tell you're not married. She's like, wow, good for you. And that's hilarious. You know, it's interesting because I said this to my wife. I said she so walked into that. Like, obviously, this person does not know who Charlie Kirk is. It's no secret that Charlie Kirk goes around to universities and he's talked to students. He's been transparent about his story. He's talked about a time where people would just show up to heckle him and no one was taking him seriously. So obviously no one like around her knows who this guy is, because I literally would have told this girl, like, if that's going to be your question to Charlie Kirk, let's reframe this a little bit. Let's not say if I happen to be pregnant. I told my wife, I said she walked into that. Like, she totally walked into that. Like, and Charlie Kirk's like, well, it's not like you get COVID. You don't just happen to get pregnant. So yeah, he makes a great point there when he's like, you know, how about we take responsibility for our organisms and we don't kill people that are smaller than us. I mean, listen, it's a touchy topic in the sense where this is the one thing where I think people have some of the most skewed views, right? Like, oh, this is women's choice, women's body. Men can't have anything to do with this. They can't. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what woman has ever gotten pregnant alone? Even if you went to a sperm bank, you didn't get pregnant alone. Someone helped you, and you still use sperm. So it's just kind of crazy. Like when like just some of the logic is wild, and I know that's why Cliff said of some of the pro-choicers, because just the things that she's saying, she's like, so I should drop out of college and support my child instead of supporting my life, and it's just like, well, I mean, clearly you didn't think that far ahead before you had sex, so that's why you're asking these types of questions. Some people would say, well, duh, but for her, it's like, no, like, why should I do something like that? Well, I don't know, like, there is a such thing as protection, but I totally agree with Charlie. Like, you don't have to have sex before you get married, but we live in a very sexually charged culture to where it's like, oh, I want to test drive the car before I buy it, and it's just like, dude, a marriage is not a car, don't be dumb. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But people say things like that, so unfortunately, like, this is one of the pro-choices that Charlie ate up for breakfast, and it happens often, depending on how crazy or wild the person comes at him. Like I said, she kind of walked into a lot of that. The good thing about this is this. There's still forgiveness in the Lord, and people who are Christians, like Charlie Kirk, I'm sure that in a one-on-one conversation, if this girl wasn't trying to be condescending towards marriage and children, that his tone would have been very different, because I've seen him with people, and he's been very different. And there is grace, there is mercy, there is a position and a place and a capacity for someone who's just going through a really confusing time, and maybe something happened to where they didn't calculate and they didn't think that far ahead, and now it's like, oh my God, this thing happened, I'm thinking about doing this next terrible thing. Is there ever going to be grace for me? Can I ever be forgiven for this? And it's like, absolutely, of course. I think the point Charlie is trying to push is like, listen, you don't even have to get into this situation, because you don't have to have sex before you get married. But when you're in a culture like this that people kind of look at marriage like it's a person with three heads, it gets weird, right? Like, why wouldn't we date for 5 years and live together? Why wouldn't we? Like, it gets weird, because we're in this type of culture of people that are supporting these things, where scripture said there'll be a time where people say that evil things are good and good things are evil. And that's where I feel like I know we've been at for some time, where it's like people think the institution of marriage is either evil, a setup, a trap, some type of contract. It's just weird, it's just weird. So this is just one of the times where Charlie had to serve, but there is grace in the Lord for something like that. It's not like if a person has an abortion that God is, okay, I'm done with this person. There's no forgiveness, there's no coming back for that. You've done the ultimate sin. There's legalism. There's so much legalism in that, and today that's not the topic, but that's where a lot of that comes from. God has the ability and the grace to forgive any and everything and anyone that he chooses to, and he's not intimidated even by a woman that's experienced an abortion. So that's really what the positive thing is for God, that nobody has to turn away. No woman has to say, I can never come to God for such a reason as this. But Charlie is strong in his faith, and he stands in his faith, and he wants to be clear that, hey, you can't be flippant with this. There's no, if I happen to be pregnant. So that's the part where I feel like she kind of walked in on it. All right, guys. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end this live stream. Trying to jump back on here for you guys before midnight. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Love yourselves. Love one another. Be peaceful. Peace.